with Ted, and Ted is in community development in Halton. He's been with the program for quite a long time, so he's got some good perspective on things and being involved in the program. And what we came up with was just a couple of, sorry, I need to just pull up my little note here. Find it. A couple of statements that may or may not be true for nonprofits working with the community data program. And so my idea for us today is to just work our way through each one of these topics and listen to what other people have to say. So for each one, I'm going to just ask somebody to come on and speak to it a little bit. And then if you would like to connect your microphone, you should be able to do that. And so you'll be able to speak live. And if not, you can comment in the chat box below. If you would like to speak, on the top of your screen, there's a little picture of a guy waving his arm up. And if you click on that, you can raise your hand, and that will let me know that you would like to have a chance to be live on your mic. And I will do my best to organize that and get people a chance to come through. So I'm just going to read through. These are the 6 statements. I'm going to read through them so you have a chance. Hopefully you've seen these already, and maybe have thought through a little bit about your own experience. And then we'll just spend about 10 minutes on each one, unless we get carried away and we need to spend more time on one. And we'll see where it takes us today. So thank you very much for joining us. And so here we are. So our first one is, not-for-profit organizations struggle to resource the staff to work with data, find money to pay for the program, keep data analysis skills in-house, and communicate the data. Number 2 is not-for-profit organizations are reliant on relationships with partner organizations, such as health units, municipal or regional governments, to make use of the data. 3, not-for-profits look for very specific ways to cut the data for specific projects or topics that are not always available in the catalog. 4, leads need to manage expectations for not-for-profit members when joining the CDP. 5, community agencies are unsure of how data can fulfill their mission and mandate. And 6, not-for-profits play an integral role in local collaboratives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Ted to come on and speak to the first statement. If you would like to speak first on any of statements 2 through 6, go ahead and write your name in the chat box and just say number 2, number 4. And I'll get that organized ahead of time, and I'll ask you to be the one to speak first to the statement. And if you don't, if I don't have somebody, then Ted's going to be our backup guy today to cover them. But it would be great to hear from different people. So Ted, are you mic'd up now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hopefully, can everybody else hear Ted? You can feel free to type in the chat box if you're having any technical problems. We'll get that sorted out as we go. We also have, I'll just let you know, we also have Mike Dieter and Michelle Fromovic, who are also from the CDP on the computer with us today. And so they can also speak to things or answer questions about the program as we go along, as it will help our discussion. So great. Thanks, Ted. What do you think? Number 1.
Number 1. Yeah, well, I think that's especially for not-for-profit organizations, depending on what their mandate is, and that sort of, I mean, that sort of goes down to number 5, sort of, but not really. But, you know, just in terms of having the staff on in-house who work with the data, you know, keep those analysis skills in-house, communicate it, and then, you know, even perhaps finding money to pay for the program, depending on how the local consortium is set up. But also even outside of the community data program, if there's other data that an organization might want to access, you know, finding dollars to pay for data, even if it's not, especially if it's outside of the community data program. I think that's always a challenge, and so I know that, you know, even for other planning organizations that I know of here in Ontario, that can be a challenge if they're smaller operations, and particularly, you know, finding people that understand the data and nuances of things like the census and how the census is organized, and concepts and limitations or other data like tax filer data. That's always a struggle to keep those people in-house, and if they're especially so, they might get scooped up by other organizations like health units or local government, where might be also in need of those kinds of skills and probably can pay better salaries than many not-for-profit sectors. So I think I'll sit there, and I don't know if others want to respond to that particular question or that statement.
So I think this first statement covers a lot of what the struggle is, because, and I think, Ted, you added a unique point too, which is the idea that even if you do manage to find those skills in-house, the competition for those jobs at other organizations that have the ability to keep people longer and sort of have a more interesting pay scale than the not-for-profits do. You're losing people, and then the ability to train new people and bring them in is also very difficult.
Exactly.
Get them going. Does everybody else experience this as well? Does anybody else want to share? Feel free also to share, your personal, your professional experience with this and how it's been a struggle for you as well. You can also chat, just type into that box. I mean, I assume this is true for everybody. Okay, I see that Dennis is going to speak. So Dennis Hilke. Okay, go ahead, Dennis. Let's shut your mic.
Is my microphone working?
There you go. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead. Okay,
good. I wasn't sure. My role with United Way is actually I'm on special arrangement with United Way to represent them on CDP as a technical person. And my career goes way back. I've been using data for probably 40 to 50 years, if not longer. And my retirement hobby is working with nonprofits and trying to help them use both qualitative and quantitative data for their different programs. The big challenge is two parts. One is having money to actually pay for things. So you've got that. But I think the even bigger challenge is really not knowing what to do with data. So first of all, what is available is a big thing. And then they really don't know how to use data in their day-to-day work. So that's a big challenge.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, so Dennis is saying one of the big problems is just knowing even what is available. And we'll wait. Albert, feel free, just to go ahead and type into the chat box, and we'll bring any comments in the discussion as well. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
I would say that I would agree with that in terms of knowing what is out there. Very often there's a struggle for many not-for-profit organizations, even if they're not working with data internally, and we're talking maybe more specifically stuff around the community data program, but it could be any kind of data, be their own organizational data, and of course many not-profits are reporting evaluation, impact, and other such things to various funders, and they might be gathering data for very specific things that they're reporting on, and even knowing how they could use that in other ways. Never mind knowing what their data lives in the universe, how that might help them in their program planning and understanding their community. I think that's a very real thing, and then of course getting then to that point even of communicating the data. I know I held a data workshop here in Halton recently and focused a little bit on some of that. It was a short workshop, so you can only do so much, but getting people to think outside of, you know, your typical bar charts or line charts and other ways of getting data can be a challenge. People aren't always working with data.
Sorry, we're getting a little bit of background noise. If you've got a mic hooked up, if you can mute, there's a little picture of a mic on the screen. You can mute yourself. What I'll do is, from my end, I'm going to, sorry, hang on a second. We'll get this figured out. I think I can mute a few people from my end. I will do my best to do that and avoid some background noise. Yeah, so what Ted is saying too is this idea that, you know, trying to get people to even know what's in there as you're supporting other organizations around you as well. This first, we're really talking about the resource problem in this first statement and about having the resources in-house. And so I wonder on that note, you know, the idea of trying to get people to know even what's in the catalog and for you folks yourself to know what's in the catalog. I mean, what is it that is the big challenge there? Is it not having enough experience with the data in order to then understand what's in the catalog? Is it not having time to spend to get to know what's in the catalog? What is the block, as far as you can say, you know, just off the top of your head, what's the big block to getting to know what the resource is, what the catalog is?
Hi, this is Laura McDonough from United Way, Greater Toronto.
Hi, Laura.
I would say off the top of my head that one of the blocks is just agencies understanding, you know, what the different variables actually mean. So they might have an idea that they want to look at low income numbers. But then when they start to understand, you know, well, what low income number? Is it household? Is it individual? Is it economic families? And is it, you know, before tax or after tax? And finding exactly what variable it is that they need to use in order to answer their research question. I think they kind of get intimidated by the complexity of that and don't really know where to turn in order to answer some of those questions.
All right, and I'm going to ask Jason with PolicyWise. Jason, do you have a mic set up? Just give Jason a second and see if we can get him hooked up. Okay, Jason, while you're getting your mic, we can't hear you quite yet. Okay, go ahead and type it out, and while we're waiting for that, we'll get Dennis. You can go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm not doing well at keeping track of who's speaking, but the last person that just spoke, I think, really makes the major point or amplifies the point I was talking about earlier about just, you know, well, what indicators do you use? I don't think people appreciate the degree of complexity behind the richness of resources made available by CDP. I was quite excited when I saw the program, and as I got to know more about it, it just reinforced that first impression. So you get that kind of thing. If this sounds terrible, you want to know which low-income measure to use, my website actually has one of the features on it. Has a low-income measure blog, I guess, for lack of a better word. Just a few thinkings on that. But coming back to your original question of you know, finding the data, how to find it, and accessing the website, I know while we were waiting for custom geographies, it was quite a long wait here in Nova Scotia. We were the new kids on the block at the time. And so I kept asking and kept asking. So the communication side left a bit to be desired. And actually one day I bumped into, said, something on the website because I just said, well, there must be something there by now. And I did, and I went, hey, hallelujah. And I downloaded it, and I saw a whole bunch of other data sets that were implied it was there. But Nova Scotia was only in one of about 15. So I ended up downloading about 15. You get that. Now, from the point of view of using the data, the profile custom geography, which was the one of prime interest to myself, so it's also the first one available. 6,000 lines of data available in 2 different data sets, and for the entire country of custom geographies. So just being able to download those of interest to me, I enjoy doing it, really happy for it, but it's not easy. So one key thing, and I did find your most recent newsletter was great because it outlined some of the new stuff that was there and also what was now available. And that really helped me. So I went back in and updated some of my data sets. So I thank you for that.
Thanks, Dennis. So we'll just go to Jason's comment here in the chat box. So yeah, certainly the comprehensiveness and complexity of CDP seems to be aimed at the more expert user. So certainly the data sets are very rich and there are different options. So for example, for looking at low income, as Laura was speaking to, you can cut that very many different ways using the CDP data, and it's there for a reason. And I think that the people who are more the high capacity users not only appreciate the different ways of cutting for low income, but also why you would do it. But the difficult part is that if you're coming in as a a more moderate data user, and I'm sure many of you are working with people who are coming in at that stage, the options are too complex and sort of overwhelming to look at. And so then it does become difficult because they're saying, we just want one measure, like just tell us what it is. And they're getting lost in the other things. And so that's definitely a resource question as far as having the skills to come in and understand, even if you're looking for a small bit of data, what do you do with that? And as Dennis was saying, you're just looking for a little bit, your geography is one of thousands that are in the table, and so trying to figure out how to get just yours out of a large table. And obviously the value in the program is the richness for the amount that you can use, but that is also then overwhelming for the novice users. In this question, we're talking about resources. And so thinking about the resources resources for the moderate level users. So resources that, explain how to measure low income and why you would do it differently, because that's true for everyone. That's true for everybody across the board. And as nonprofits, you're probably mostly looking at similar measures and, maybe using one measure sometimes and one measure another time, but the reasoning and the logic is the same for all of you, and you're looking at the same data. And so in that way, sharing those resources, and CDP does have some simple ones, hopefully. We try to make them simple. But I guess one of the things to look at for that, and that would be how to get over that hurdle of being overwhelmed and trying to get people beyond that and into actual using of the data and, giving it in small bits as opposed to the whole catalog at the same time. And then Albert is saying that certainly funding cuts, big problem, right? Or small budgets to begin with. And Albert's in a neat situation because they've been sort of one of the central people working on data and actually supporting some of the people around them. That's my understanding of the Winnipeg sort of model. And Winnipeg actually works on projects together, and so they're actually using resources from other organizations as well, I think.
Albert. And so they have the data skills in-house, and so that's very helpful because then they're doing some of that translation of getting the data into sort of a more usable format. Okay, and Ted.
Hi there.
Hi, Ted.
Okay, I just wanted to circle back to Jason's comment towards the end, where he has a very good question about, for the CDP in terms of, does the program itself want to reach the novice user as part of the business model? As he says, it is true that it does require probably more resources, but and then what's the role of local consortiums in playing that role? And I think that's always been a challenge in terms of balancing the resources that are developed at the national level around a community data program for all countries across the country, and then what the local lead potentially take on that role. And it's, and again, obviously some are better resourced or have those kinds of capacities more than others. And so I think that is an important question, because as the program grows and we have more communities joining, but also more local partners joining those consortia, what does the role of the local versus the sort of a national program lead level, what is that relationship with some of these more moderate or novice users, and how do we potentially develop resources that can be shared right across the board? I know I met with somebody who's actually a fairly savvy data user, but not very familiar with the community data program itself, and so I took her through the website and showed her what was available, and she was just like, wow, this is like amazing. But even that point was something that just hadn't been on her radar screen, and wasn't, even though she had access to the community program, hadn't been something she had even chosen that much until she had a better sense of how to move around the website and understand what was actually available. So so I think it's a bit of both, and I know that that's always going to be the challenge with the CDP.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually going to segue really nicely into our second point here. And I'm going to just draw attention to Albert's comments here. So I'll just read it again. So not-for-profit organizations are reliant on relationships with partner organizations to make use of the data. So this is, we're already hearing this as the local leads and as the sort of the national level program as well. But this idea that you experience this, or maybe you are on the the provision end of this, in that not-for-profits don't tend to have enough resources to join the program, pay their fees, get in there, download data, do some analysis with it, and then produce something. Rarely on their own do they actually have the skills or the budget and can actually sort of follow through on that. And so, for example, in Winnipeg, there's quite a network of people working on data, and then Albert's describing themselves as the data hub, as saying, we have the data, we know what's there, we know what we can do with it, so come to us, we'll work on something together and help play that role. And for, Ted's having people come and sit with him, and he's walking them through the program on a one-on-one basis in order to get them more comfortable and familiar and kind of open up the program for them. Now, I think this is really, it's hard to replicate from a national level, which is why that local consortium is so effective, because being able to sit together and work on stuff where you're familiar with your neighborhoods and you know what you're saying when you're saying East End or West, or that downtown central area by the library, that you can do, and what does that mean for you to be reliant on those relationships, and how is that working out for you? So let me know if anybody wants to. This would be a great time if you have an example of a way that you've worked together in partnership with somebody in order to help make use of the data, whether you are a supporting person or if you had to draw on, a city person or a region person, maybe a health unit, in order to accomplish what you were trying to do. We'd love to hear any stories you have to share about that. All right, Dennis, go ahead.
I've been sitting here quietly waiting for somebody else to jump in with something. I think I could probably give two examples. Again, I do a lot of work with nonprofit organizations. My most recent effort was with the Cape Breton data portal they're trying to get going. And it really is quite a partnership that they put together, and in fact they've been drawing on MyPeg. That's from Winnipeg. MyPeg example of a data portal, and they're hoping to build a Cape Breton variation on it. They're working with the city, retired, Cape Breton, Sydney. Yeah, I think Sydney's the city. It's a very small city, but working with Sydney, Cape Breton, and Cape Breton. They're working with the University of Cape Breton. It's being headed up by New Horizons as the lead nonprofit. So a lot of partnerships involved in that to try to pull the data together, try to get the data. And they're really going to be relying on the community data program custom geographies. The big challenge right now is just defining those geographies. And from my experience, that's a long one. Another example that I have to look out as a good example, but it didn't go anywhere, I'll mention why. And that was Inspiring Communities, which is a 5 departments within the Nova Scotia government are collaborating on the Inspiring Communities Initiative. And there's 3 communities in Nova Scotia. One's Digby, one's North Sydney, and one is Dartmouth North within Halifax. And they work with the 211 program and to try to find out what services people were calling for and what wasn't being looked after. And so we got the 211 data, and we're able to extract that data based on the 3 communities, and then summarize it and find out what services people were inquiring about, who couldn't be contacted, and then we managed to pull it all together and put it up on Google Maps. So this is just a couple of examples of where working together. You're going to do much more than you can by working by yourself. Okay.
One of the things I was thinking about this, I think you're right, Dennis. Certainly, if you can work together, you can do more. And I think not-for-profits, can sometimes be in a harder position because they are reliant on making these partnerships. It can provide for much richer work being done. I think some of the larger city organizations, I think the folks in Toronto will appreciate that within a larger city or region organization, they can do a lot in-house, but then that doesn't allow for relationships to be formed with other organizations. And then the perspective isn't maybe as open as it could be. And so not-for-profits, you're forced to build these relationships and forced to go outside and sort of sit at a desk with somebody else and talk through the data, but that also then allows for more collaboration and more interesting work to be done. So I was wondering if anybody has anything to share on that, if they see the relationships you're reliant on, are those also a positive thing in your work? And Jason is also bringing up, this is a difficult piece and something that is hard to make very obvious to people, but the difference that CDP data is compared to the free open data that can be used. And I think this is something we can talk about on our next topic here, actually. And so maybe we'll just, we don't want to run out of time, so we can have some general discussion at the end if we want. So we'll move forward. Number 3 that we're going to talk about is not-for-profits look at very specific ways to cut the data for specific projects or topics that are not always available in the catalog. So this is hopefully going to get into discussion that Jason is thinking about too, and that how do you let people know what the value of being a member of CDP is and the value of the data for what they're doing compared to what they can do with the open free data. So certainly on a staff level, we try to work this out as best we can. But I think it's hard to do it from our stage to make it really, the impact really felt compared to what you can do at a local level. So for example, in Winnipeg, there's custom geographies. You know, Dennis is talking about custom geographies out in Cape Breton, and helping people understand what it means to have data that's bound within those lines is different than what they're getting otherwise. And so helping them understand that, helping them understand, and maybe not just the geographies, but you know, looking at the low-income example again, and looking at the different ways to cut up for low income. And that not-for-profits are generally not doing ongoing, let's just see what the data tells us, but are looking at very specific projects. They've maybe gotten funding or a grant to work on something very specific. And so this is something that may or may not be in the catalog. How do they find it if it is? And then if it's not there, how do you support them and sort of follow through? I'll let Ted go ahead. Do you want to speak to this? Sorry, Ted, you want to come on and...
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Hi, Ted.
Okay, sorry. So I think wanting to circle back to what Jason was saying as well in terms of you know, the incremental benefit as he stated. I think it's really that challenge of beyond what's well on the Stats Canada website, that we have things like the target group profiles, for example, or the various ways that we've cut up the data, including low income, things like tax filer data set that people aren't always aware of, or even how to think of using it in unique applications. For instance, there's some of our emergency preparedness people are looking at a vulnerable person's reach out for their planning purposes, and I had suggested the taxpayer data as one way because it does have low-income tables and seniors, for example, and by census tract in terms of the way we get them. They hadn't thought of looking at the data in terms of more timely data. They're always looking, of course, for as good data as possible. So that, you know, there's an example that you wouldn't think to use tax filer data in quite that way. But I also think, you know, sometimes there's very specific projects, and something that we're working on right now here in Halton with our newcomer strategy, which is our local immigration partnership, and sort of funny in terms of the second step in terms of working with partner organizations like local government to make use of data. They came to us because they have data, both they know that they don't have some of the capacity in the particular staffing that they have for the local immigration partnership to look at some of the changes that are happening in diversity in our, but also they have some custom runs on the longitudinal immigrant database that they again didn't have capacity to analyze appropriate, and so we've been doing that work with them as well. But that, there are specific things that have been useful, and I think even the very recent example from the CDP in terms of the Energy Poverty Project is one where we've had a partnership that's actually benefiting us right across country around something unique that the CDP has partnered with in terms of doing some data analysis, but also created a set of data tables that's available to all the partners. And we're definitely interested in looking at how a particular data set can be useful for some of the work we're doing here locally.
Does anybody else have any examples of having to kind of work around, with somebody looking for data and having to do a workaround and, help them understand what tables they can use? Give people a little chance to type here. We all talk faster than we can type, I think. Dennis, do you want to speak to this in the meantime?
Sure. Going back to the idea of there's open data out there versus what's on CDP. A couple observations on that. One is that the idea of having it in both places to me is absolutely no issue because I'd rather bump into it in more than one place than wonder where I can get it. Why I found that one particular value of CDP is that I have found it much easier to find data on CDP than I can on the StatScan website. So I think that a lot of the value-added services of CDP are those little extras that you offer, and I know I have just absolutely only scratched the surface on many of the tools that you have. Probably because I work with raw data, pull out what I need and package it to satisfy the group or the situation I'm working on or with. You get that kind of thing. Beyond 2020, at one point I didn't like it, but the Beyond 2020 lets you extract the data in a way that you can't in Excel in order to manipulate the data. So with the Beyond 2020, I extract it in CSV format, import it into Excel, and then I can take advantage of the strengths of Excel. Whereas if I download it directly into Excel, I can't do that. So that's just, yeah. I'll ramble from this on quick.
The necessary, some of the necessary, what some people think of as hurdles, and then once they get a bit familiar, I think there is some value in 2020. But it is, I think for a lot of people, is an obstacle, right? And they see it as an unfamiliar format, and it's enough to sort of turn people off and get them a little bit nervous about what's happening, right?
That's absolutely right. It took me quite a while, and I finally figured out one or two things that I could do. My big challenge was my challenge has been more when I download the StatsCan stuff and all of the enumeration areas from across the country, and to whittle it down to Nova Scotia has taken me a long time. I've since learned some shortcuts on how to handle that. So, but it did take time. I found the St. Mary's University Beyond 2020 guide to be excellent. It was short, to the point, and very quickly gave me the 2 or 3 things I needed to navigate. So that's St. Mary's University, and they have a really good Beyond 2020 guide.
Dennis, can you send me a link to that? Maybe that's something that we can get up on our website, or at least link to them.
Okay, and if you don't get it soon, send me a reminder email.
I'll send you a reminder. Sounds good. Yeah, I think Beyond 2020 is one of those things that you definitely notice that there's a resource block in either, just having the skills or the time to do a little bit of basic training on it. I think one of the added value within a local consortium, if it's possible, within the group, is if there's somebody that you can sort of ask and say, I know there's this table, I just need this out of it. Can you spend 20 minutes and pull this out of it from Beyond 20 into an Excel file for me? And that's all they'll need. And I'm sure there's organizations that are members that will only need that 2 or 3 times a year. And so actually spending the time to get comfortable with Beyond 2020 and, be able to do a lot with it is not something that actually makes a lot of sense for them. But they just need to know who to call when they do need it. And sometimes within the local groups, you can actually find that, and you can match partners up and say, yeah, no, that's fine. It'll take them less time to just pull out data every once in a while than it will to, spend 3 hours training you on anything.
Well, I think an observation I want to make there is almost a lead into number 4. Our Nova Scotia Consortium has almost disappeared into the woodwork, and I find it a bit disappointing because we had such a really great collaborative start. And so one of the suggestions that I would make for the central, if there's some way you can encourage the local consortiums to be more active. I mean, the fact that I think I'm the only one from Nova Scotia on this call, and I think that speaks rather loudly to my point.
Does anybody want to sort of chime in here as far as it's difficult when you don't have an active consortium? I think some of you have, historically a longer relationship with CDP, and so there is more sort of ongoing back and forth, or you're working with each other maybe on different programs as well and different relationships outside of CDP, so then it does facilitate your relationship within the community data program. Sorry, maybe that's confusing. If you're not working together with the other organizations around you on other programs, it's difficult then to have a brand new consortium like in Nova Scotia come up and you're trying to build these relationships. So even if you have a big sort of excitement in the beginning, how do you keep those relationships going and get people involved so that you can use each other as resources and work on stuff as, and collaborate a little bit? I think that's quite a large problem if you're doing it and it's not happening elsewhere in your work. Okay, and Purna, where are you from? You're from, okay, so you're working with the City of Toronto. Yeah, the census geographies are hard to understand, and certainly with mapping is a great way to understand them and actually make them come alive. And so it's difficult if you don't have mapping resources if you don't have a way to map or somebody around you who's going to put things together for you. And you're saying it's also difficult to compare with data from other sources. Oh, the census, yeah, because the census geographies don't always match up with anything else that's useful. If you're using private data or any kind of local data, might not make a lot of sense to compare within a census data. And so hopefully that's where the custom geographies come in. I think one of the custom geographies is one of the biggest selling points of this program and makes it the most useful for your local nonprofits. I think we're going to keep going because I feel like this discussion is going right into this number 4, which is nice, and I'm glad this is following well. So number 4, we're talking about leads need to manage expectations for not-for-profit members when joining the CDP. So I'll ask Ted to talk to this in a second, but I think this is the idea around, you know, you might have a new member come in who's a not-for-profit, and they come in and they say, well, I thought I could have data for this, and I thought I was going to get this, and you were going to create maps for me, and, you know, my membership meant that I was going to get all these things. And that's maybe not true within your local consortium. And how do you manage, as nonprofits come in, what do they need? What will they have the capacity to actually do with the data? And what is a reasonable expectation of what they're going to get out of the program with the resources they do have? So Ted, I'll ask you to talk to that one again.
Okay, I think, you know, this is, you know, from a couple of different angles. One, I think, as Mary already pointed out, you know, nonprofit organizations, especially if they're smaller, they might join there might be, I don't know how it's necessarily sold to them. They might see joining the consortium as a way to, you know, meet all their data needs, and they may be disappointed, and particularly if there aren't the supports for them, or they don't, again, going back to that first statement where they might not have the resources in-house to do anything with the data. And so I know that even locally over time, we've had different small nonprofit organizations join for a period of time and then leave the consortium because they didn't really have the capacity to do anything themselves with the data, but they did join, I think, to Mary's point, you know, because they saw that this would be linked up with the organizations that knew how to do stuff with data, and it was maybe partially to understand what was the scope of the data that are available through the CDP. And I think, you know, that leads need to understand the different places that nonprofits are, you know, from the small to the large and different capacity, and what they can bring to the table. And then of course be able to communicate appropriately what are the supports that are available either through the lead or through the various parts that are around the table, and then provide those training points, because, you know, as it's been pointed out, you know, working with the data, particularly in file formats that aren't familiar, how to extract stuff out of Beyond 2020 if you actually get to that stage, and how, you know, how do you even manipulate the various dimensions within a Beyond 2020 table to look exactly the way you want with your local data being displayed, and then you can copy and paste that into Excel, and then of course doing anything more complicated or going to the mapping piece as well. I think that, and then those custom geographies. But I think it's that managing, you know, those expectations that, wow, we're going to get to this treasure trove of data and everything will be supplied to us, versus, you know, which may happen in some cases, but I think in many consortia they don't have the resources to do this. So how do we manage that in a way that they understand that there are going to be limitations as to what can be done through a lead organization.
Has anybody else experienced this? Is there some frustration around nonprofit groups that have become members and then maybe have even left the program since because their expectations were not were, were not met, I guess, within the program, and whether they were, not clear enough to begin with, or if they just didn't pan out within the program. Has that been a big frustration for people? On the flip side, it would be great to hear with anybody whose expectations were blown by the program, and that they thought they were going to get a little bit of data and then they realized how much they could actually do with it and were thrilled. That'd be also great to hear. I can see some people are typing, so we give people a few minutes. Hopefully you can't hear, there's somebody trimming some trees on my street behind me here, so you can hear the tree trimmers going away. So this is interesting. So Jason is saying that he jumped in too early, and they really saw themselves as playing the role to support the other organizations with the data. So that's really neat, because that's, coming in and saying you wanted to be the supportive role and not that you were going to produce something with the data. And I think certainly, a thriving consortia does have somebody who's ready to be that major support and sort of the middle of the node, so that people can be coming to you for help and to understand the data as well. I think that works really well when you're, when you are connected. And so Jason's thinking that, they didn't come, it didn't work out that way, and so maybe the relationships weren't quite there. And that's something, Jason, that we can work on together and build up the marketing piece, and maybe spend some more time understanding what the vision for that would be within your local, within the local environment of the organizations that are there and are active. Spend more time maybe looking at what projects they're specifically working on and understanding what the data really is there. I mean, it's hard because it's a lot of time to put into something before it's ready to go, but anybody else wants to speak to that, that would be great. So Albert is sharing, it's difficult because of data delays, and so for people who are constantly looking for data, the delay is a problem. And that is certainly understanding expectations, right? I think for some people, you're really familiar with the census cycles, and that, census cycle means that you're not getting census data for, at least a year sometimes after that census has been done. And so understanding that, current data right now is census 2016, but for people who are not entrenched in that world, 2020 is close upon us, and so it seems like 2016 numbers are maybe not that relevant anymore. But understanding the expectations for when that data is actually going to get to them, when they can do things with it, because that does make a difference if you're working on timelines and grants and things. You need to know when you're going to have the numbers to actually complete the work you're doing. Yeah, and Albert's saying that they often go to Stats Canada first before coming to Albert for data. This is actually not a bad plan, right? Some of the data on Stats Canada is very easy to access. You don't even have to download it. Some of it's just on tables right on the website. It can be a first good look. I think there's nothing wrong with encouraging people to look at it first and have an idea of what's there. And it's also a great way of showing them what's not there. And then they're saying, you know, well, I don't want it by the province. I want it, you know, for smaller geographies. And you say, well, okay, yeah, so the smaller geographies are coming, and it's coming then. And definitely Mike Geider, who's on staff at CDP, has a good idea of when we're expecting data. You know, there are delays, but he can definitely be a resource to you when you're managing sort of expectations for what exact tables are on order and when do we expect them to actually come. We do try to put them in the newsletter and let you know when the new tables are up. They're also on the front of the website. There's a little part of the website on the very front page that tells you what new tables are in. And so that can be something that you're checking as well. Yeah, managing expectations around the details in the data, but what they're going to get at what level of geographies, understanding that some data is not available to smaller geography. You know, we're not ordering it, it's not coming, it's never going to come. But then helping understand why they're not there as well can be a resource-intense process for those of you who are supporting people coming in and looking for data. We got a couple more comments coming through here. For those of you who would like to be more involved in understanding sort of the expectations of data and stuff, this is where the data purchase and access working group that Mike manages is on top of that. And so if you would like to, you're welcome to join that working group. You don't have to participate in meetings. You can actually just get yourself on the mailing list for that, and then you'll get more details as that comes along. Is that right, Mike? I can just send you their name. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anybody can be on that list, and or you're also welcome to join the meetings and participate in discussion, and that will give you sort of a front hand or a front row seat to what is going on with the data and what's coming when, and if there's delays and stuff, you'll be the first to hear about it. So that can be something you can do if you are playing that resource role for people in your consortium. That is a good working group to sit on. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving along. We just have two more to get through, and I think we're already have talked about this a little bit, but this is one that Jason brought up. So number 5, communities, agencies are unsure of how data can fulfill their mission and mandate. So this is really getting at, you know, when you're talking to a not-for-profit who they're clear of what they're doing, they have a clear mission, they have a clear mandate, and there may be you know, they're not used to using data to further that mission. They're not used to using data to support what they're doing and supporting their work. And so being able to sort of bridge that gap and help them understand not only what the data is there, but how it's actually going to move their work forward. How is it going to support what they're doing? How is it going to help them measure? How is it going to help understand more about what's going on in their communities? You know, what can they track over time? You know, what is the potential for the population? How many people are they looking at? How many people can they expect to reach with what they're doing? Do any of you have experience with that being both a potential as far as this is a really interesting role that the community data program can play, and saying, listen, all the data exists and you can just pull it out, and this is actually going to help you be more clear about what you're doing and actually push your mission forward in a way. Have any of you had an experience with that? Dennis, yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't come as a surprise, does it? I was actually the treasurer of a nonprofit group here for about 6 years, and the group had, I guess by the time when I started, they had one program. When I finished, they had 3 or 4. And of course, since stats are a core of pretty much everything I do, it's not surprising the group ended up with a lot of stats, but they had a housing connections at work program, really good stats on that even when I went in. And those were an incredible help on trying to get year-to-year funding. And then while I was a member of the board, I put together a housing that works paper. So looking at affordable housing, of course, drew up some housing statistics for it. And we ended up getting a housing support office created, probably partly as a result of a lot of the stats we had. We got some funding for it. This even when both the province and the federal government were cutting back, but United Way stepped up and provided seed funding. But I think it highlights the experience I had is we hired people who were good at the job and helping provide people find homes. But I couldn't get them to keep numbers on their clients and their successes and what they did and that sort of thing. And it took me 2 to 3 years, but once we did, those stats really became the foundation for making strong grant applications. And I think we're significant support in being able to get money to fund all 3 of the programs on an ongoing basis. So, but I do think that for the most part, community agencies are so focused on their work that they really don't understand how data can help them. It also gives them a way to assess their mission and mandate. And we've had, over the last 5 years, a lot of reviews by funding agencies who said, okay, who are you serving? And the people weren't able to give a good answer, and not surprisingly, the funding was either cut back or cut off, and for lack of good information about the programs. So it's my experience is a lot of nonprofit and community agencies, just certainly locally, just don't appreciate what good numbers can do for you.
Does anybody else have a similar experience where they're, people are not using stats and they're not using it to support their work? I wonder if most of you are so far into the data world that that's not true, maybe, and that you're not seeing that gap often. Sorry, we'll just give everybody a few minutes to share and type this up if you'd like. So Ted and Halton, you find that working with other organizations about data, it's not just about letting them know what the exact data is and what's available in the program, but a much bigger picture about what data can actually do and how it's helped you move your own work forward, like sharing your personal story in your organization about what you're using data for. Yeah, go ahead, Ted. You go ahead and speak.
Okay, yeah, I think So sometimes agencies, I think the statement is true that they're unsure of how data could fulfill their mission and mandate. And I think having conversations, if they come to us about potential data needs, or just in casual conversations, sometimes I know we work within our community. Sometimes it's a marrying of their own administrative data that they have, and as Richard has talked about, and then seeing where their clients are coming from, and using, for instance, some of the census data to show here's how you can marry the data that we're accessing through the CDP with your own data. But sometimes they don't even understand that. We worked with our local community legal a number of years ago now, where they were wanting to get a better understanding of where their clients, particularly around, they have a number of clients around various housing issues, and so wanted to know where they're coming from, and if we're located, some of their satellite offices were located in the appropriate place, and lo and behold, it was, because their mandate is to serve low-income populations, and in fact they were, even though some of their board members were wanting to move out of one location, and the data showed that they were in the right spot with that satellite location. And then in another instance, we worked with a food security organization to sort of, again, map where are people coming that are accessing their various food programs, and mapping that against some of the demographics that they were interested, or get a better understanding of the demographics of where their clients were coming from, and so how are we reaching, again, the right people, or were there some other dynamics at play in community that help them better understand how they were moving forward with their mandate, and how they'd improve that.
That's quite interesting, yeah. So looking at nonprofits who are collecting their own data, they are monitoring, they are using their own staff to work on their projects and to track how things are going, but helping them understand that, combining that with the census data can provide a much richer story of what's going on, and sort of build it out from there. That's very cool. Now, Jason, you were saying that, for you guys, it was hard because you were trying to sort of be that support, and then it didn't work. The nonprofits around you, are they people that were probably, working with their own administrative data and collecting their own data to begin with, and that you could play a role in helping them, fill out the data and build the picture with the census data? Or are they more organizations who maybe didn't have any use of data? Be interested to hear, in that perspective, what you're looking at. Sorry, again, folks, we're just going to give people a few minutes to type up here. While we are just waiting for people to type, one thing we'd like to ask from every person who's logged on with us is that if you can just take some time right now, based on our discussion or what you've been thinking about in your relationship with the program, if you can identify one action that you'd like the CDP team, and so that's the staff, that's Mike and Michelle and I, and we have Jamie as well working on the program. So that's one action you would like the CDP team to take to support your needs, or the needs of the not-for-profits around you. Okay, and I will type that up for you right at the bottom here. And so it'd be really helpful if everybody can type that out into the chat box. That's information we can really take forward. you know, in some way the staff here, we almost feel very grassroots, and that we're very responsive to what you guys need. And we can pull together simple resources for those moderate users fairly quickly. But it's much more useful if we have, you know, conversations like this where we're hearing more about the uniqueness of the needs and, you know, what specific things do you want? Because we can write up, you know, a 50-page document on how to use the program and nobody's going to read it, and it's going to make it seem even more overwhelming. But, you know, a half a page on something, or a, you know, a 20-minute video or a 20-minute webinar on something, these are things we can actually do. And so just take the time while we're finishing up our discussion here to share those with us, please. Yeah, so as Jason's saying, it's hard to convince the organization that the investment in CDP. So this is still the marketing piece for Jason. That's a hard one. And certainly, Jason, maybe for you, the most useful thing would be to have a story from somebody like Ted in Halton about what's going on for them. And really, I mean, it is hard to fully predict what the benefits will be. Especially when you're looking at funding and grants and, you know, longer term funding for organizations. But Jason, maybe some, you know, stories from other people that are doing similar things would be helpful. Sure, Ellen, yeah, and we are recording this webinar, so it will be available afterwards, and so please feel free to send us any comments, or, you know, in the next day or so, if you're thinking about it and you have something you want to share with us, you can send to us as well. Maybe I can bring up the there's the information at communitydata.ca. That's the general website for us as well, or sorry, the general email for us as well. For anything else you guys think of you want to add for us. All right, and we are going to finish up just with this final comment, which is not-for-profits play an integral role in local collaboratives. So I think a couple of you actually play the lead organization in your consortium, and that I think is different and, you know, allows for a little bit more collaboration than when it's housed within a larger city organization or region. And so I guess that's one is, and, you know, do you agree that we need not-for-profits in all the consortia, and they really do play an interesting role? Maybe Michelle, I'll ask you to speak to that actually. You know, Michelle's been a lead on this program for a long time, and he's dealt with leads from cities and leads from nonprofits, and I think they have a different experience. And so, Michelle, do you want to speak to this for a few minutes about, you know, what you see being different from a nonprofit as a lead organization versus the city and region?
Sure, although in some ways the not-for-profits themselves understand it a lot better than I do, but we have over the years recognized and heard from nonprofits that they face challenges that are quite distinct from typical leads. And when I say typical leads, typically we're talking about a municipal government. And it's not that complicated, I guess. Municipal governments have both access to more reliable sources of funding and access to skill sets and GIS departments often. So not-for-profit is more challenged in that way. I mean, what we can do is quite limited at the end of the day. But this program, one of the themes that's come out is, and one of the challenges is, how do we respond to the needs of organizations and individuals that don't have much data capacity, but obviously they get the value, but they don't have the time, the budget, the skills, the staff to work with. And they do require more resources. And that is a priority of ours. We know that easily half of the users in the program just don't have that capacity to work with our data catalog. And that's obviously not particularly constructive. So we're aware of it. And this, actually, the reason that, for me at least, that we had this roundtable was to hear from all of you. Maybe there are some things that we can focus on to make it a little more easy to work with organizations that are really critical to who we're trying to reach. It's easy to work with a large city government department that all they need is let us know when the data is there. We will download it and we will suck it into our geospatial data system. That's all they really need. It's very easy to support that. But that's not what we are trying to only to do. So I mean, there's not really saying anything that you don't already know. But we want to continue, particularly over the next year and a half. And I say year and a half because part of the context for us that has changed is working with FedNet means we have a lot more time, or we will have a lot more time to spend on core program activities and less worrying about the administrative backend. And that focus on core program activities includes doing a better job of maybe designing some tools that do allow you to access some of the data products in a way that doesn't require you to download 5,000 rows and 50,000 geographic data points if all you're looking for are 3 variables for 3 neighborhoods in your city. There are ways of doing that. We just haven't had the mind space or the administrative space to be able to do stuff like that. So again, I feel like I'm rambling a bit. We know that there's a challenge. We have a sense of how to respond to it. And we do feel like over the next year and a half, we can take sessions like this and in the annual meeting and actually be able to start responding. So sure, that doesn't tell you anything dramatically new, but we are really excited to hear that while you're struggling with a lot of these, you are also seeing the benefits. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Michelle. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I think we are hearing a lot of, we have heard some of this before from you folks. Hopefully it's helpful for you to hear it from each other as well. And there are some comments here that we can actually follow up on. Certainly this marketing piece that Jason's talking about is something we can definitely work on and help support you with. And then there's, things on the catalog and, some events and things that we can talk more about and bring into consideration. So certainly from a staff end, this is a useful conversation for us. Hopefully for you folks it is, and maybe you've even identified some other people in the program that you might want to follow up with. And you can let us know too. I can always put you in touch with each other. If you heard from somebody that you'd like to have another conversation with, let me know. And I will try to facilitate those conversations as well. And so that's it. So if there's any other comments or questions, please feel free to put them in there now. I will hang out for a few more minutes on here and sort of be around if there's anything furthermore. But I think this will be the end of this webinar. We are recording it, so you can go back and listen to it. And there'll be some notes and things sent around afterwards as well. So thank you all for attending and taking the time. It is much appreciated, and it does make the program better and hopefully more useful for those people that are working in not-for-profit.